I will go onto Facebook, and then I'll always do that little thing in the beginning where I share to my group, and it's that awkward 5 seconds. I hate
Your
watching
last
these
minute
videos
mark.
back, and I'm like, and I'm sharing to my group. Okay, let's see. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm gonna hit go live. Okay, hello everyone. I am particularly excited for this podcast episode. And just to give a little bit of background as we're getting started here, I actually did. So Lori and I have been working together for about a year and a half, who you are going to meet here momentarily. And we actually first started working together in, when was it? It was like the end of 2020, right? Was
Right.
okay.
Mhm.
So
I
it was
was
the end.
in the end of October. I think we started the intensive.
Yeah, and you had launched your business like, what was it? It was December 2020. And you have done such incredible work since we first met. It's like it literally blows my mind. And it's funny too because we did a testimonial interview together, right? Like right after you completed the marketing intensive. So that was probably sometime maybe like March or April of 2021. And what has happened in the time since then? It was great then. I think we had talked about you celebrating like 21 or 22K or something like that within your launch. But what has happened in the time since then has been really mind blowing. And I didn't want to just bring you on to invite you to share about your, all the money you made, which I'm sure will come up, but you have just grown and up leveled as a human. It's like and you were wonderful before, but it's like almost don't even recognize the person that you have turned into these last couple of months. And it is so powerful. It's so beautiful. And the way that you consistently show up for my coaching community, it's just like, it's so inspiring. And I just think that, it would not be the same place without you. And you have so much wisdom to offer to the world, which is why I decided to invite you on today. So that was my intro. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor for you to say those things. I respect you
Yes.
so much. And I value your opinion. And so to say that, it's humbling and it's an honor too. So
Oh
thank
my
you. Thank
goodness.
you for having me.
Yes, such a pleasure. And I titled this podcast Lori's Transition from University VP to 30K months online. So it's like, that's like the summary. But tell us maybe like a little bit about your background. So when we met late in 2020, tell us kind of like what life was like and had been like and how we ended up here today.
So I have to condense almost 30 years,
Yeah.
so I'm leaving out lots of pieces. But when we met, I was extremely miserable in a career that had just evolved in almost 30 years in education. I started out much like you as a public school teacher, and then from there moved into being a grad professor at universities here in Texas, and then moved into administration. And all of that in close to 30-year time. And the last, I would say, probably 10 years of being in education, so much had changed that I was getting increasingly more frustrated and unhappy about the system itself, because what I believed in was really starting to not align with what was happening in education and higher education in particular. And then fast forward another few years, and it just got worse. And so I found myself feeling much like an outsider in a system that I had a lot of belief in and a lot of passion for changing people's lives, changing generations of people's lives. And that's no longer what I felt that I worked in. And so the environment was highly political. It is, in every field, it's like the behind the scenes of, all of the sort of dirty stuff. And it was highly political, and it had become increasingly toxic where I was. And so I'm not a crier, but there were many days I drove home in tears because of what was happening. And I was just really, really miserable. So for a few years, I had been dreaming of this idea of how to escape it. And that's literally what it felt like it would be for me, is to escape it.
Yeah. And
And
actually, I'll just say, like, I think so many people have that feeling. I know when I was in my last job doing fitness business coaching, working for another company, all I dreamed about for like a year and a half was never having to go to another one of those horrible meetings, or getting, I felt like I was in an abusive relationship. Like, it just was
really,
every single day. I remember feeling sick. And yeah, so I think that there's probably a lot of people who are going to listen to this who are in that same emotional state around their current job. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And what, no, and that's a really great point. And alongside the time when that was happening in my emotion and my feelings and about my professional life, my health was getting increasingly worse. I had been a yo-yo dieter, much like, many of our clients. And so I'd been up and down over the years. A lot of that was dealing with the stress. And I found myself once again in my early 40s. So probably about 8 years before I ended up leaving education, I found myself in yet another transition where I had taken on another responsibility, a role with great responsibility, lots more stress, and I had gained about 30 pounds yet again. The same 30 pounds I've lost and gained over, years and years. And so my health was a real issue. And my physician, in fact, talked to me several times about how worried he was about that component of it, and that coming from the stress. And so I kind of fell into what I do now because I was looking for something for myself, being someone in, quote unquote, corporate America, and that high level, high profile, high stress job, looking for some way to, in a healthy way, to get healthy and lose the weight. And there was just simply nothing out there that really was sustainable for me. And so I started figuring out for myself, getting educated, as if I had time, but getting educated and doing that. And so that's kind of the parallel story that was going on along those years. And so that's why when I started dreaming about getting out of it and escaping higher ed, part of my dream was how I survived those last several years was through getting mentally and physically healthier. And I knew that there were a lot of women out there like me who needed that same kind of help because they are in those roles too. And so that was kind of my dream. Like, I could do this and help women who are like where I was.
Yeah.
But I never believed that it's really difficult to give up a 6-figure job, benefits, retirement, and I wasn't at retirement age yet. And that is a really difficult thing to do, and just say, okay, I'm going to put all this on the shelf and go start a business. And I have no business experience. I have no marketing experience. Right. And so that's kind of, I'd gotten to the point that I was so miserable that I was ready to do it.
Yes.
And by no coincidence, I found you.
Yes. And I still remember that. And I remember just like, I think even before you signed up, I think when you like had applied to work with me, I was like, she's one of them. Like, I was like, she is one of the ones, like, and I had that sense from you. And I would say, this was always available to you, but you had to work through a lot of things to kind of get here. You were making money very quickly, but I know that some of the other things were even more of a challenge for you. So can you talk about like maybe just some of the growth that you've experienced over the last like year and a half or so?
Absolutely. And you're completely right. I felt like a woman who had left an abusive relationship. And so that was, and I'm a very strong, independent female, and feel my entire life I have been that strong. And so it was also very humbling when I left my job, to feel like I was questioning my worth. I was second guessing myself, and could I really make this work? And how was I going to do it? And there was a lot of feelings of unworthiness, doubting myself, questioning what my entire life has been, why, and the debt that I have for my PhD. And there was just a lot of mental muck that I was dealing with. And so part of the beauty of meeting you and getting into the intensive was, one, taking that very bold step that was very scary to do it, to join the intensive and have the belief. But also, once I got in it, that program was not just about strategy. It wasn't just about how to go about the tactics of building a business. What you gave to me was a re-belief, I guess, in myself. It's not a word, but this idea that you brought back to life in me through your mentorship, what I felt had been squashed and I was afraid was dead.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Cause 30 years in a career,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really a huge thing. I think most people, if they looked at that, they'd say, I'm miserable, but I only got 10 more years of this or whatever, like before I can retire.
And
Two,
I had
two more years. Oh my gosh.
And the only reason that I wasn't already at that mark is because very, very early, when I was a baby first teacher out of college, I taught for 2 years and I was like, oh, to heck with this. I don't want to do this. And I left actually for 2 years and I bought those 2 years out. And so the irony of the fact that here I am making this decision and I'm short 2 years that I actually would have had of service, was another sort of layer of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Should I just go find a job doing anything where I could pay into our system to have that credit? And so I really walked a plank in terms of belief. But I have to tell you, the reason I was able to do that is because I really did not own that belief at the time I did it. I felt like it was something I had to do, but I didn't own that belief. And it was borrowing from you, which ironically is what people have always told me as a leader in higher ed. That was one of my greatest qualities, was that they borrowed my belief from them, that I believed in them so much they were able to grow it. And so at the time when I was down and out and couldn't find mine, I borrowed from you and used that to fuel me to get through the intensive.
Oh, so good. Yeah. And really, like, I think, what I can observe from an outsider and what I've been through myself, and I observe it in you and others, is just like, it's almost like, to make the transition, you just have to have enough. It's just like, okay, I think this is possible. And then it's like, you get into it and all the junk comes up, and it's like, I always tell people, like, day one, I'm like, entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. You're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, and they're all going to be in the same day. And so I think, you and I and everyone have to go through that period where it is really challenging to navigate the emotion of business. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, the coaching industry has an 80% plus turnover rate within the first year. And I think that so much of it has to do with, well, number one, the fact that people don't have the strategy and they don't know what they're doing and they don't make money. So of course people don't stay. But I think an even bigger part of that is the fact that people don't anticipate, or they don't know how to manage themselves when it comes to the emotional side of business. So can you maybe talk a little bit about like that transition? Because there's always, for everyone, there's very rough waters in the beginning, but I feel like you've gotten to a place where it's like you're on a sailboat now and probably hit a wave every now and then, but it's like, it's much better than it was.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. You tell us that from the get-go, right? But there's also an aspect of not really being able to understand that until it starts and you start to experience it. And your guidance through those periods was a big part of being able to get through them and make the transition that you're talking about. And it really is something that takes time. So it was like this culmination of highs and lows, and really being very self-aware of, how does this feel? What is it bringing up for me? Why am I feeling this way? And doing that multiple times over the course of several months. And sometimes feeling like, okay, I've got this, right? Like I can handle the lows because I'm expecting them. I know they're going to come. And then it comes at you in a different way. And you're like, crap, here I am again. I thought I'd mastered this, right? And so it's like, you need to go through those cycles of them for a while But I think the key part of that is staying connected to coaching, for one, so that you have the support through that process. My decision to go into the mastermind after the intensive and immediately go into the mastermind, even when I wasn't completely sure that I was ready to be there. But again, you were like, absolutely, you are ready for this.
Yeah.
Again, I leaned on you and thought, okay, she's a straight shooter. She's not going to tell me that I am just to get me in there and let me sink. That wouldn't serve her either. So I borrowed that and got into it. Excuse me, and I say this with such strong belief in it. Had I left the intensive and not gone into the mastermind, I would not be where I am. I have no doubt in my mind, I would not be where I am financially. My business would not be where it is, being identified in articles and featured as, a disrupting program for, female weight loss. None of that would have happened. But even more than all of that, I would not have grown in the way I have mentally and emotionally, and not just in business. This has spilled over into my personal life. As a matter of fact, ironically, a situation came up this morning where my husband and I were talking about the interaction with a former colleague that I had this morning after something very devastating has happened in his life. And Roger mentioned the way that I handled that situation being so much more evolved than I would have in the past. And so it's not just about business. It really is about changing my life and just having this like unshakable belief that like, I'm so excited about what I have. I'm doing some other things next. And
yes, we're walking into millions next. We're at hundreds of thousands. We're walking into millions next.
And I absolutely believe that with every ounce of me to my core, that's not just possible. That is what is going to happen.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so good. And, I love that you talked about how it translates into other areas of your life. And because I always say, it's like, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's not about like the destination. It's not about the money you make. It's about the person that you're becoming in the process. And you now know from the experience of the last year and a half, you have to grow and evolve as a person. You have to coach yourself. You have to change your mindset. You have to change the energetics that you're operating under before you can receive at the level that you are now receiving. And that will always be true for me, for you, for everyone. And so I'm curious, like obviously, being part of the mastermind where you're in a community of people who are doing big things, who are forward thinkers, who are, of course, having the strategy and the access to the people, like that's definitely helpful. But what else has maybe shifted within you that has allowed you to reach this next level? Because it was a pretty, I feel like, abrupt change. And
Really?
Yeah, like over a short time, like I feel it was maybe 2 or 3 months where you just went through this massive, like, I don't know if it was belief shifting, but something changed and you just started showing up even better than before. And I know income skyrocketed. So I don't know if you can like pinpoint anything, but I always just think that's helpful.
I think it's probably a couple of things. We're all so layered in the sense of who we've become based on our experiences and our childhood and all of these pieces, right? And so I think there are a couple of components. And for me, a big one has to do with relationships with others and the relationship I have with myself. And when I say with others, a part of it for me, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people, when you work for someone else, and in particular in my situation in higher education, there's a competitiveness about the professional world. And so after years and years of being a leader in that kind of an environment and seeing the kinds of things that can happen, your trust and your ability to trust erodes. And so when I trust someone, or when I used to trust someone, it was not a real trust. And it was a very guarded, because based on my experiences and things that have happened. And so I, at a point in the mastermind, I remember really exploring that internally and physically and mentally letting that go, letting go of the need to guard, letting go of the feeling of needing to compete, letting go of, truthfully, some jealousy. I was always happy for people when I saw them do well, but I turned that inward as a weakness about me. And I really worked on and thought a lot about and read and really explored and talked deeply with my husband about my desire to change that about myself. And so, just one example is when other women in our mastermind share their successes, I'm genuinely happy for them.
I can feel that from you. Yeah.
It's a genuine, just, I really am just so happy and grateful to be in their presence too. And I think if I had to say one thing, that finding that core flaw, if you will, within yourself.
That's so brilliant. Yeah.
And really working to change that in a very strategic, it's time consuming. It's hard to be honest with yourself. It's hard to look at yourself almost from kind of the inside, but also from the outside. It's hard to reflect on past interactions and things people have said to you and about you over the years that perhaps in the moment you weren't able to receive and believe. And looking at those and thinking about where there were parts of that was true and not wanting to be that person anymore. And that's what, that's one example of how it evolved. But really, I think it really is about finding the one core characteristic that is not so positive about yourself, and that is also central to how you operate, how you relate to other people, to how you think about yourself. It has to be something that permeates every aspect of your life. And when you can find that and really, really genuinely change it, that's when I feel like the floodgates opened for me in every way, in my belief about my business, in my belief about my worth as a person, just in every role that I inhabit.
So good. Yeah. And as you were talking, it's like, I think you kind of went into some of this, but I was just thinking to myself, people who achieve what you have achieved think differently, right? Yeah. People who have achieved what I achieve think differently. So it's like, I'm trying to figure out like how to even ask this question, but it's like, if you look at, I swear, sometimes I just feel like I'm living in an alternative universe. And, fortunately, most of the people that I talk to are either like peers of mine in programs and masterminds, or like my clients, people who are kind of in that forward thinking as well. But it's like, so you talked about shifting around. I mean, that's so powerful what you shared around like finding that core flaw, that thing that's like holding you back, right? Because we've talked before about how it's not just what you're doing or what you're saying, it's also the energy that you're bringing to your business and how people are receiving you. And I think that has a really powerful shift, because I've certainly felt like, I think since going through that, like more of an openness from you as well, which is so cool. And it's like these really subtle little things, but you may not even realize that it's like noticeable to other people, but it's a result of like doing that inner work. And oh my gosh, it's like so brilliant. I'm like, what's mine? I gotta think about that, because we all have one for sure. It's great.
For sure.
You learn that in literature. What is it? Like the Achilles heel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I feel like I need to think about that. But like, people, like I said, people who have achieved your level of success think differently. Is there anything else that you can pinpoint? And maybe it's like similar to me where you're having conversations with like non-entrepreneurs and you're like, I don't get this, or like, I don't know if
Yeah.
there's anything coming up.
Yeah. So other ways that it comes out in my life, is that
I don't know. It's like I'll give you an example. So, when the pandemic first hit, I think at first I didn't realize like what a big deal that was. I was like, oh, we
yeah.
got medicine and stuff. It's fine. But I didn't realize what a big deal that was. But I also was just like, okay, cool. Like we'll figure it out. Like there was never part of me that was like, oh my gosh, business. Like I just
Right.
moved forward. Right. And now there's all this talk about recessions and stuff like that. And I'm like, people get very wealthy during recessions. Like that's my first thought. I'm not
Yeah.
like, most people who are like, oh my gosh, business is not the time and all that. So I don't know if there's just like any thoughts that you can pinpoint that you can, I don't know, separate yourself from kind of how most people think and have gotten you the success. I feel like I don't know how to ask the
Yeah.
question, but hopefully you see what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. I know what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
it is hard to put into words. Excuse me. But I think another example of that is recognizing how other people react and respond to certain situations, to certain people, and not just on an event level or a situational level, but in a larger way, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. That really is a reflection of the kind of people that they are, how they think, those kinds of things. And so I recognize that, which is, probably akin to like when you say, when you're talking to non-entrepreneurs, it's like you like operate in a different world.
Mhm.
And I think it's very similar to that. So I'm very observant of and recognize now that difference in how people who, and I don't want this to sound classist, because
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
like
I know. And I was
entrepreneurs
trying to
think
like,
in
I
this
was like, I don't want anyone
superior.
to sound like, I'm not thinking entrepreneurs are better. It's just a different way of
Right.
thinking. Yeah.
We are, but
Yeah.
but there is this, it's like an evolution in thinking in every way that permeates how you respond to situations, how you respond to people, and and recognizing and realizing when you observe it in others how different it is
Mhm.
from you. And that is really a key part of the change that I've seen in myself. I don't think that I realize, because when you brought it to my attention, I would not have thought that other people could see anything different. I knew
Mhm.
I was feeling and thinking differently, and I knew that that was resulting in financial ways. It was showing up differently in the numbers of clients, and just, and these odd ways that have really no explanation other than the energy that you inhabit and that you project. That's the only way I can describe it. And so I see that, but I wouldn't know that anyone else recognizes the change in me, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And so it's, from the inside looking out, it really is, it's so relational to me. All of these situations really revolve around how you relate to other people, how you relate to money, how you
Mhm.
relate to rejection, how
Mhm.
you relate to confrontation, how, it's like it's all about relationships
And
with
what you make
animate
everything
and with
mean.
objects.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you make everything mean, right? It's like,
Exactly.
like I've done a whole podcast episode on this, like about like my Facebook ad trolls. I got another really good one yesterday. And I look at sometimes like when I respond to people or like when I'm talking to people and they're like, but what if so and so? I'm like, who cares? Like I cannot even describe how little I care
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I care about my clients. Like I care about it
Sure.
from that regard, but it's like, I literally, some stranger or some family member, whatever, I'm like, I literally don't care what anyone else thinks. And it's like, it's all about, like you were making me think, it's all about what we make things mean. And most people will make things mean something that they don't need to mean. And they'll talk themselves out of this entire like life experience that you're having. And I was also thinking about like, thoughts around investing and around money. Like you made a post, I think it was like yesterday or the day before, just about, investing in yourself, and you're on like, you always share like screenshots of our coaching calls and stuff, which is great. But it's like, if you think back to Lori, from a year and a half ago, putting a couple $1,000s into a coaching program, like it was a totally different mind frame versus where you
Oh
are
my
today. It
gosh.
was like scary versus, of course, that's what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really is. And a part of that, and I hope it relates to what you're saying, but you made me kind of think about it. A part of that shift to me too is that in response to the trolls, for example, or in response to, questions that people might ask that I would have previously perceived as a judgment or a negativity, or somehow on this negative side of things,
Mhm.
in lots of different situations like that. Now there's this desire. I don't care that it doesn't make me angry. It doesn't, it doesn't do anything in the negative sense. What it is for me is like this larger purpose of maybe helping to educate them, to help them see things in a different way too. And so in that way, I think it's not just this internal change, but how
Mhm.
I see myself, and maybe even an obligation that I have to help in whatever ways I can, other people being more open to this type of thinking, if that makes
Totally, totally.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like a specific example that I can think about where it's like I can notice like your thoughts and my thoughts as being different from other people's thoughts is like, and I'm sure you go through this as well, but it's like I'll be having a conversation with a prospective client and they're like afraid of investing, and they'll say things like, "Oh, I don't really want to like take on that debt." Or I don't really like, it's scary to put that much money out. And I'm like, okay, well, the belief behind that is that you're not going to make it back, right? Like, because if you fully believed, hey, if
Right.
I put this out, I make it back plus some, then that's an entirely different experience. So there's like so many just really minute examples that are the difference between how the majority of people think and how you are thinking that has allowed you to get to where you are.
Yeah. And, I think a key part of that too is, I don't want anyone to think that, oh, I've done this, I have it now. And I think in this
Mhm.
different way and I'll never think in another way. A part of that is recognizing that it is like, much like everything else in life, is a continuous journey. It is an evolution that really, in the genuine sense of evolution, there's no end point to it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
so I catch myself in certain situations, perhaps slipping, right?
Mhm.
But now the difference in that is, rather than going down that path, I am very self-aware of it.
Mhm.
And I coach myself through it, is the
Yeah.
way to describe that. And very quickly redirect myself. And so it kind of goes back to how I liken how I behave in the world as a teacher, because that's
Mhm.
been who I am for so long. But it's like I'm teaching and reteaching myself all of the time. And that
Mhm.
level of awareness is a difference that I see too in me versus before. What I've also recognized about that is it has made me a much better coach. It's made me a much better friend. It's made me a much better daughter. My mother and I's relationship has not always been the strongest. And that's a huge change that I see in my
Amazing.
life, is that relationship, and the timing of that at her age is just means the world to
I
me.
know.
So
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
just on so many different levels, it's made me better at what I do, which gives me a lot of satisfaction. On a personal level, I talked about my mom, but on a professional level, of course, we all want to make money, and I have huge income goals. but I genuinely thrive off of the impact and the potential impact that I have the ability to make on someone else's life. And so this evolution, making me a better coach, just fills me with even greater purpose and joy and peace. I think is really the key word, is that I am so much more at peace as a human being than I ever have been in my life.
It's amazing. And I think that's just a reflection of the trust that you've been able to build with both yourself and your business. Like, you trust that this is going to be here to provide for you because you trust that you have the resources, you have what it takes to create whatever you want.
Yeah. And that's not, I think some people hear that who don't think like us, and they think, oh gosh, that woo woo thinking, those hippies or those whatever, and the reality is I probably had a little of that judgment in me at one point today, to be honest with you. But you can't deny the evidence that with that trust and that growth and that evolution, and as it has progressed, so has the very tangibles in my business, my income, something everyone can relate to, just taking off when I made that kind of, when I describe it as like the switch flipping, I see it in my clients, when they're in a program and when it just starts clicking and their mind starts opening differently, and then all of a sudden it's like the switch flips in their brain, and then they start reporting these drops on the scale and inches, and so it's like there's the evidence of exactly what we're talking about. And for us as business owners, the same is true. If we allow ourselves to grow and evolve as we're helping others, my income has grown, the opportunities have come to me without me having to go like banging on doors to find them. It just so many ways, my ability to take risks and not feel like they're risks. They're just what I do now, right? And all of that has resulted in very tangible evidence. It's not woo-woo. We're not hippies that are, hanging on to like standing around in the morning and like conjuring up a belief and thinking it's going to happen by sundown. There's a reality in how energy can positively affect you in tangible ways.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Like, I just have chills. This is so good. This is like, I want to just keep going forever and ever and ever with this. And honestly, like what you have shared is $1 million advice. It really is, because we talk lots of strategy on this podcast, and you've been a client of mine for a year now. We talk lots of strategy in the programs, but it's like,
and I love it.
Which I do too. That's like my number one love. But it's like what I have learned in my years of building success and in watching so many other people like you do it as well, is that it's so much more than what meets the eye, which is why I've been talking a lot about like the intangibles of success lately. And this is such a good example. So I really hope that everyone listening to this hears you and thinks about, how can I apply this thought or this belief or just these lessons to myself in order to help me grow? Because all the strategy in the world doesn't make a difference if you don't get right with you. Like, it'll be up and down or inconsistent or not at all. So
I 100% agree with you. And if you don't have it, again, I liken this to the journey that my clients take, physical and the mental piece of it. But if you can put all that strategy in place, and you probably will have some success, you will probably see some gains. But if you don't also cultivate that inner evolution, the way you think, if that doesn't change, if your beliefs don't change, if that doesn't come along with it, whether it's a little slower, that's fine. But if it's not growing along with it, that initial success, I truly believe that you have in a business. And I think it's why so many small businesses in any industry fail in the first couple of years. When you don't have that initial success will die on the vine. You cannot, I do not believe that you can sustain a profitable business that truly makes an impact if you are not working on both.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like you have me so pumped up. I'm like, what can I go out and create? What do I need to do today? And I really just hope that everyone listening has that same feeling. And I just appreciate like you and your time and your generosity so much. I'm so excited for what we were talking about putting into the works next for you. And it's going to be even more magical, I think, than everything you've been able to create to this date. And I'm so excited to see you in person in 2 weeks because you're coming to my mastermind retreat.
I am too. And we could go on with, you know, a love session all day long.
I know.
You know, I absolutely adore you on a personal and a professional level. You know, you're much younger than I am, but I look up to you.
Oh.
And I hold so much gratitude in my heart for you.
Same.
I cannot even tell you what you mean to me. And
I know.
You literally have changed my life.
Oh, don't make me cry on my podcast. Yeah. When we met in person last year at the first retreat, I was like, she is my person. We climbed treetop obstacles together. You met my Mila. Yes. I have tears in my eyes, so I'm going to calm it down.
Well, I absolutely adore you. And I genuinely, for the rest of my life, however our paths play out, you will always be part of me.
Oh my goodness. Same. I think we have a lot more work to do together.
Oh, for sure.
I want to say it, but I'm not going to. So
no, don't say it.
I appreciate you so much. And, I can already see, because we're streaming this on Facebook, there's like people are already thanking you for all of your wisdom. I can see some comments.
I forgot we were streaming on Facebook.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. And I just know that this is going to impact people on the podcast for years to come. So I'm in such gratitude for you. And I look forward to probably doing an update soon, because it's going to be huge.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Lori. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.